Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hot Topics. Welcome to the Don Lemon Show. We're so glad that you're here. We have a very serious show for you. Not quite as playful morning as we do sometimes here because of the news, and we've got to get to it. Have you ever, there are moments in history when it feels like everything is speeding up. Nothing happens, and then everything happens. When the headlines all blur together, the danger becomes something that you can feel in your chest, and this is one of those moments. Last night, we were at dinner and got the word, many of us, what the escalation that was happening in Iran and also in Israel. Overnight, Israeli warplanes launched one of the largest coordinated air campaigns in the region's history, more than 200 fighter jets, precision strikes, and a clear message. This was not symbolic. This was strategic, and it was personal, okay? Targets deep inside Iran were hit. Air defense facilities, drone factories, military command sites. In response, Iran launched dozens of drones and missiles towards the U.S. and Israeli positions in Iraq and the Golan Heights. And here is where it gets even more volatile, okay? Because the president of the United States, Donald Trump, left that summit in Quebec abruptly after clashing with world leaders on Israel and Iran. He stood on the tarmac and he warned civilians in Tehran to evacuate. He said, leave the city. And that was the president of the United States, not in a UN address, not through diplomatic channels, on camera, off script, issuing what sounded more like a battlefield threat than a call for peace. Meanwhile, in Israel, the Iron Dome lit up the sky overnight, intercepting more than 40 incoming projectiles, according to IDF officials. Sirens wailed all across Tel Aviv and Haifa. Families in Israel, many still grieving from the horrors of October 7th, they took cover in bomb shelters. For them, this isn't abstract. It is trauma looping on repeat at this point. There's so much to talk about. Okay, I want to get now to legendary journalist, someone who has reported from Iran, Israel, Gaza, Sudan, Ukraine, you name it. He walked through refugee camps, he sat with survivors, and he's reminded us again and again that war is not a chessboard. It is a family home, a hospital, a school, a life. Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, best-selling author, and moral witness to some of the world's darkest hours, Mr. Nicholas Kristof. Nicholas, thank you so much for joining. How are you doing?
I'm well. Good to be with you, Don.
Am I correct in my opening statement that this is how serious this is?
Yeah, I think it's very serious. Effectively, Israel started a war with the aim, it increasingly seems, of overturning the Iranian regime, not just of taking out nuclear sites. And so it has expanded from nuclear targets to energy targets to political targets and others. But it's, I think, pretty clear that it can't actually achieve that aim of ending the regime, or indeed of wiping out the nuclear program on its own. And so now, it is asking the U.S. to move in and use American bunker busters to take out the Fordo enrichment plan. And so, now President Trump is going to be making a decision about whether the U.S. should join that war, which I think would be a mistake. But, there's a real risk that this then escalates, maybe closes the Strait of Hormuz, raising oil prices. I mean, there are lots of things that can go wrong, and some kind of a deal, which I think is the best path to actually containing the Iranian nuclear program. For now, we don't seem close to that.
Yeah. Let's talk about this flashpoint, because there are people who are saying this is getting frightening. The citizens of the U.S., Americans are wondering how close this will possibly get to us, or how much this will continue to escalate. You have seen this kind of flashpoint before, Nick, retaliation, rhetoric, and then the rapid escalation. What does your gut tell you here? Are we watching the opening act of a regional war?
It's really hard to see exactly where this goes. There are, a couple of options, but I think there is absolutely a risk that this escalates. I don't think that Iran would like to make major attacks on Saudi Arabia or close the Strait of Hormuz, but I think that it feels that it needs to establish deterrence. I don't think that, in Iran right now, I'm sure there are debates about whether it should make an all-out effort to actually acquire nuclear weapons. The intelligence community's judgment until now has been that it wants to acquire fissile material to have the option of having a nuclear weapon, but is not presently working on that. I think that, that could well change, and this could accelerate Iran's push to a nuclear weapon. And, then what Israel is hoping for is that the regime will collapse. And I know that's not impossible, but I think it's pretty unlikely. You don't normally see air bombing as a route to actually overturn regime or engender some kind of bottom-up uprising.
Yeah, let's talk about Israel, and then we'll hone in more on Iran. But after the trauma of October 7th, growing political isolation, do you think that Israeli leaders felt that they had really no choice here? Because everyone's wondering, how did this happen? First, nothing, and then it escalated. As I said, did they have no choice, or was this, or is this, you think, strategic overreach?
I think it's strategic overreach. Look, Bibi Netanyahu for years, for decades, has been wanting to take out the Iranian regime. And I mean, he has reasons. Iran has played a horrible role around the region. It is threatening to Israel in fundamental ways. And I think Netanyahu felt that that the previous strikes had been encouraging. He did manage to dramatically reduce the viability of Hezbollah in Lebanon, a main Iranian proxy, and he'd managed to take out Iranian air defenses. Right. He certainly, in the Israeli intelligence is just kind of amazing. What they did initially in Lebanon and what they did more recently in Iran is they're astonishingly good at that. And so I think, he saw a pathway to really badly degrade Iran. But I think he's fooling himself when he thinks that he can actually overturn the regime itself. And, at the end of the day, there were talks going on a nuclear deal, and some people thought they were encouraging. I think it's hard to be sure, but he ended that process of those those nuclear deal negotiations. And I guess more broadly, I look back, and the old JCPOA nuclear deal between Iran and the US and European countries, that was working. That was constraining Iran. And then Netanyahu urged President Trump to pull out of it, and he did. And that led Iran to accelerate its nuclear program. So I don't have much confidence in Netanyahu's judgments about Iran and the best way to misjudgments in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Nick, I wonder, President Trump telling the people of Tehran to leave the city, that was really alarming last night, not just for, I'm sure the people in Tehran, obviously. It says Iran should have signed the deal, which you were just talking about, that they're working on. I told them to sign. What a shame and waste of human life. Simply stated, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I said over and over again, everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran. To tell them to leave the city, what does that look like from the inside of Iran? You've been there. What does that do to public fear, to global perception of the United States?
Well, look, it's just, you tell people in a city of more than 10 million that they've got to evacuate, and it's in the middle of the night there. There are gas lines. They don't have fuel for their vehicles. Many people don't have cars. It's preposterous to think that you're going to have a big city like that suddenly evacuate. So it obviously adds to the fears. And, it's also, one of the things that I see here as a lost opportunity is that so many Iranians are against the regime. And when you travel in Iran, you see that people are just fed up with the regime, that they see it as hypocritical, as autocratic, as corrupt. They're fed up with that. And so I think that after the supreme leader dies, I think there is a good chance of a real transformation in Iran. But when you bomb it, when you warn everybody in the capital to leave, then there is a tendency to have people rally around the flag.
Right.
And I think, if anything, that may give the regime a little more, an incredibly unpopular regime, a little more lease on life. But it's hard to overstate the degree to which the regime is unpopular, to which if you look around the Middle East at countries where people observe Ramadan and fast during the day, my judgment is that in Iran, people are less likely to fast just because the Islamic regime has so discredited observant Islam.
Hmm. Talking about authoritarian regimes, they often thrive off of foreign aggression. Nick, does this moment risk strengthening Iran's hardliners? Maybe you were alluding to that just seconds ago. Just as protests and resistance inside the country were beginning to rise again, right? Was that what you were just saying?
Yeah, and I don't know that left as it was, that people would manage to overturn the regime sometime soon, but it certainly is true that it was enormously unpopular, that at some point it was going to be forced to change. And you saw that in women's hair, that increasingly the regime was actually letting women get away with having their heads uncovered, because they just couldn't arrest every woman in Iran. And it was a tribute to the courage and strength of Iranian women. But you did see popular movement force change in the regime. And I think this, as you suggest, this feeds into the supreme leader's narrative that everybody is out to get us, that we have to rally around, that we need to, to crush internal dissent to save the regime. And so I'm fearful that it has that impact, and I'm fearful that it may have the effect of leading the regime to accelerate a push to nuclear weapons, using the fuel that they already have. They seem to have fuel for about 10 nuclear weapons that they've already produced, and they just need to enrich it a little bit more, from 60% to 90+%, and then actually make a warhead. So this may be counterproductive, both in the sense of helping the regime and in the sense of actually driving quickly toward a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, look, I've always been impressed by, obviously, your work or intelligence, but also your what you have done in the humanitarian realm. Okay, because you've always focused on the people who are caught in the middle. So from Tel Aviv to Tehran, what does an ordinary Tuesday, Nick, look like right now for a mother just trying to get her child to safety? I mean, look, we're looking at all these bombs and whatever, and missile strikes and the Iron Dome, reacting, and all of that. That is, to say the least, unsettling and frightening.
Oh, absolutely. And in Israel, you have these sirens that go off, and then everybody rushes in the middle of the night to some kind of a underground shelter. But I've been in those shelters when the sirens are going off, and you hope that your shelter is going to work, but of course you never know. And there are families there, there are moms who pulled their kids out of bed to go there, and this is invariably happening at night. Kids are crying, and meanwhile in Tehran, something similar, but they don't have those underground bunkers, and so people are just fearful that it's going to wipe out their building. And residential buildings have been targeted. More than 200 people killed in Iran, and kind of nobody knows where this is going to go from here. So what I hear from people in Iran is that there's real terror, especially in Tehran.
Yeah, I mean, but what's interesting though, we heard so much about Gaza, and where the areas they were trying to strike were near hospitals and places where residential areas, etc. And now in this action, both sides are targeting the targets that they want to reach are near residential areas and, unfortunately, hospitals, etc. So that's an interesting perspective, I believe, when you think about what's been happening there, especially over the last year or so, or two since October 7th, almost 2 years.
Yeah, and I mean, also, we have to remember that Gaza is still in the middle of this, and this is kind of a distraction in some sense from the horrors and that are continuing in Gaza, and that may have been one of Netanyahu's motivations, because whenever the spotlight is on Gaza, it's not very helpful to him. And President Macron of France was talking about recognizing a Palestinian state, which was also certainly not what Netanyahu wanted. This does change the conversation, and creates obviously enormous fears and uncertainties about the risk that this just escalates out of control.
Yeah. Nick, I've known you for a while, and you've said before that war isn't always the loudest act. It's often the quiet suffering that follows. What warning signs do you see now that the world may be ignoring or normalizing too quickly here? Because you said, remember, look, let's not forget what's happening in Gaza, right? And this is a distraction of sorts.
I mean, Donna, I guess what I also think about is just the lesson that this sends to other countries around the world. Since President Trump came in office, we've generally seen a degradation of what the U.S. always called the rules-based international order. And, look, this was hypocritical at times. We tended to apply those rules more to our adversaries than to ourselves and to our allies. But there was something to it. And then when President Trump effectively sided with Russia in its invasion of Ukraine, I think that, badly undermined that rules-based international order. And you had situations like Rwanda effectively invading Eastern Congo, taking their cues from that. And I think that likewise, when we have sided with or sympathized with Israel as it attacks or invades neighbors in what many people think are a violation of the rules of war, then I think that further, leads to a kind of law of the jungle situation internationally and creates risks elsewhere. There are lots of countries that have real problems with their neighbors or nearby countries and might want to settle them. And I think, we're making it easier for them to do so. And ultimately, look, the military toolbox can be a useful one. We have to have that toolbox. We can do things that other tools can't do. But the diplomatic toolbox is often more effective and certainly cheaper and certainly more life-saving. And in the case of the Iran nuclear program, the diplomatic toolbox had achieved a lot more than the military toolbox. And, we're moving in the other direction right now.
Yeah, look, I should have played this earlier, but I think it's appropriate to play now because I want to ask you about the leadership, U.S. leadership and the media. This report happens to be from the BBC, what folks are hearing internationally and not domestic. I want to play a little bit of this report, Nick, and then get your response. Here it is.
We start this hour in the Middle East, where Israel and Iran have attacked each other for a fifth consecutive day. Reports of damage and casualties in both countries. Let's take a look at Israel, where on Tuesday morning, this video was recorded in Tel Aviv, apparently as an Iranian airstrike was taking place. And this footage was filmed shortly afterwards in the city. Plumes of smoke rising there. Not yet clear what damage or casualties there may have been here. Also, reports of explosions in Jerusalem this morning. Meanwhile, Israel's emergency services say 5 people have been injured by shrapnel at one of the impact sites in the central part of the country. Iran says it's destroyed strategic targets in Israel using drones. Well, turning to Iran now, there have been reports of Israeli airstrikes across the country. They come after the Israeli military issued more evacuation orders for parts of Tehran. Shortly after a similar Israeli warning was put in place on Monday, the studios of an Iranian state broadcaster were hit. The moment was broadcast live.
فضای غبارآلود استادیوم.
Well, after that, the station resumed broadcasting what appeared to be a taped programme shortly after that. The network says 3 members of its staff are reported to have been killed. The Israeli military says it's continuing to kill senior Iranian officials, including Ali Shadmani, the wartime chief of staff, who was hit in an airstrike in central Tehran. It says he was the closest military advisor to the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
Yeah, part of that report, Nick. So let's talk about American leadership, okay? Trump walking out of the G7 last night, issuing threats on the tarmac. Does this help deter conflict, or do you see it as a destabilizing move here?
I think the fundamental problem is that it's not easy to see off ramps without American pressure. To the extent that Netanyahu has said that he's going to continue to wipe out the Iranian nuclear program, and he doesn't really have the capability of doing that on his own, then that would suggest there's going to be more bombing and more bombing. And certainly as long as that is happening, Iran is going to be using every missile that it has to fire back at Israel, and the casualties will continue on both sides. Now, the thing that could break that is indeed a real diplomatic push by President Trump. And there are times when he seems to be thinking along those lines. And he talked about sending the vice president to talk with Iranians and trying to, resurrect the nuclear negotiations that were underway. Iran has said it is open to that as long as the fighting stops. So, that is one route that could actually manage to move to a better place. And Iran, it may well be that Israel is right, and that Iran would be more willing to give up some enrichment capacity now that it has seen what has happened to it. But the other possibility is that President Trump left the G7 so that he could try to figure out how to supply bunker busters and B-2 bombers to escalate the war, to take out the Fordo facility. And who knows what is going through President Trump's mind? We just don't know.
Yeah, he spoke about last night what he thought of this action. I think he said he was something very positive about it. Also, he did answer a question a reporter asked him about. I think it was Tulsi Gabbard saying that there was no proof or indication that Iran was anywhere near, having its own nuclear weapon. But he also spoke about this action. It was aboard Air Force One. It's tough to hear, but listen.
We'll come down so hard if they do anything to our people. We'll come down so hard, then the gloves are off so beautifully. Now, I think they know not to touch our troops.
Yeah, so they're concerned about our troops because it's targeted. I believe there were Israeli and U.S. troop or areas there, and in Iraq, I believe. You and I both believe in the power of journalism, but in moments like this, how do we make sure that the media doesn't become an echo chamber for power, especially when the stakes are life and death here?
In the Middle East, I think we've often seen real weaknesses in coverage, and that we historically, we have often covered the people who are controlling that military toolbox, who are, in the bombers and the tanks, but not necessarily those at the receiving end. And I think that it's incumbent on us to remind everybody of the human stakes in Israel and in Iran, and to be skeptical of what we're hearing from Tel Aviv, from Tehran, and from Washington, because historically we sometimes haven't been as skeptical as we should have been about what will actually happen, about what the capabilities are. And right now it feels as if we're on a trajectory that is going to make things worse. And so I hope we, sustain that skepticism. As you noted, Tulsi Gabbard had said just recently that, the intelligence assessment is that Iran is not for now trying to produce a nuclear weapon, that is trying to accumulate fissile material, to have that option somewhere down the road, but that it is not actually trying to make nuclear weapons right now. And again, the fear is that will change. Iran is trying to establish deterrence, and there will be arguments in Tehran that, look, this shows that we actually have to have nuclear weapons.
Yeah. I think you answered in part here, but I just want to get a closing reflection from you. Your final thoughts. You've been in foxholes, you've been in funerals, you've been on the front lines, Nick. In all of that, what have you learned about what brings conflict back from the brink? Okay. And what gives you any hope in this particular moment?
So, I really do think that military capacity has to be used at times. And there are some occasions like the Kosovo War where it made an enormous difference. But officials are way too likely to reach for that as the first option. And I think Israel under Netanyahu has likewise vastly exaggerated the usefulness of military weapons to try to bombing people to achieve peace. is not usually a really productive strategy. And you look at the carnage in Gaza, and you see the limitations of his military strategies. And so I just fear that right now he has started something. He doesn't know how it will end any more than he knew how Gaza would end when he went into Gaza in a big way. And at the end of the day, those diplomatic talks had achieved a imperfect arrangement, an imperfect nuclear deal with Iran under under the Obama administration. Trump tore that up with the help of Netanyahu, and we still have some option of trying to recover some kind of a deal like that, which can end the killing, end the war, and keep Iran from developing nuclear weapons.
Yeah. Nicholas Kristof, always a pleasure. I appreciate you getting up early. It's early out in the West where you are. So thank you so much, my friend. Hope to see you soon. Be well.
Okay, take care, Don.
Thank you. Nicholas Kristof from the New York Times. What a great get this morning to discuss this, and considering his work as a war correspondent and also his humanitarian work that he has done all over the world. That was a fantastic get. Again, I told you this is going to be a little bit more of a serious show. And I don't know if you would call it somber, but we are on the brink of, I didn't ask him that question, if he thinks we're on the brink of World War III. You know, he answered when we were before, and he says, I'm not sure about that, but there should be some deep concern about this escalating and becoming a regional conflict that, you know, could go beyond any of our imagination. So we're going to continue to talk about this. Also, we're going to hear more from, was Donald Trump speaking to himself in his, I don't know, I don't want to call it past life as a civilian? Because it sounds like he was talking to himself, and we're going to play that in just moments, and also talk about other things that are going on in the world. But first, here's a word from our sponsors, okay? And speaking of what's happening overseas and what's happening in the world, not our world, not in democracies, support for the Don Lemon Show today comes from MSI United States. Here's a hard cold fact that sub-Saharan Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, 4 million teenage girls drop out of school every single year because they get pregnant. Just like teenagers everywhere, they experiment sexually. Okay. So for many of these girls, there's no access to birth control. Most will never go back to school. Some will risk their lives trying to end the pregnancy, and too many will die. The good news is there is an organization called MSI Reproductive Choices that's known for going to the ends of the earth to bring girls contraception and control over their futures. Okay. So you can give today to help here. Go to msiunitedstates.org or text my name, Lemon, to 511-511. Text Lemon to 511-511, or for just $26. You can give a girl contraception for 4 years. That's 4 years to complete her education and build a future. So text Lemon to 511-511, or go to MSI, that's M as in modern, S as in safe, I as in informed, unitedstates.org. msiunitedstates.org, modern, safe, informed. Okay, so you can help a young lady for 4 years for just $26. Also, support for the Don Lemon Show today comes from Shopify. Excuse me. So you guys know how I feel about Shopify, and I feel about people starting their own businesses, becoming entrepreneurs, and a lot of people are concerned about it. They're worried. You have all doubts and all these fears. So why not turn those why not into what if with Shopify by your side? Shopify is the e-commerce platform behind millions of businesses all around the world. 10% of all e-commerce in the United States, from household names to brands just getting started. That is e-commerce. And our merch store is up on Shopify. And we have some new merch that just came in. It's on our Shopify site, and we're going to show it to you in just a little bit. So we're very happy to be partnered with Shopify to be able to do this. Okay. So you may be thinking, what if I can't do this? What about a web design? What about an email strategy? What about a social media strategy? They can do all of that. Award-winning 24-hour customer service, customer support. So turn those dreams into with Shopify by your side, and give them the best shot at success with Shopify on your side. Sign up for a $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/lemon. Go to shopify.com/lemon. That is shopify.com/lemon. Ka-ching. I like that ka-ching by Shopify. By the way, You guys can probably tell I'm not feeling 100%. I did go to the doctor today, and he said, Don, you just need to stop working so hard. You're doing too much. And so luckily, at this point, I'm just a little run down, and it's a little bit of a cold. So some of you are concerned, I know, but you can hear me sneezing and whatever. So just pray and hope that I get better. Okay. Okay. So look, this is a time gone by, and it is on that I'm going to show you here. This is on social media, and some of the news, the mainstream news reporters are talking about this. Okay. And this is old video of Donald Trump, and is going viral for claiming that then President Barack Obama is going to start a war with Iran because he has absolutely no ability to negotiate. He's weak and he's ineffective. Does it sound like he's talking to himself? Here it is.
Our president will start a war with Iran because he has absolutely no ability to negotiate. He's weak and he's ineffective.
And so who is he talking to there? Now, this whole thing, I know people, get a little bit concerned sometimes, or they say, oh, you have Trump derangement syndrome, because they say everything relates back to Trump. But in this case, it really does. Donald Trump is the leader of the free world. And with him in charge, really, of a lot of the safety of the world, it's frightening to a lot of people, since he has really no diplomatic experience before he became president the first time, and did not use his first term as president of the United States to learn anything about foreign policy, to learn anything about diplomacy. This is not the first time that he's left one of those summits with our allies, and left early, I should say. And this time he left a bit of controversy because he was sparring back and forth with other members about what should happen in Iran and what should happen in Israel, and then leaving the G7 this time early. But it is a frightening situation of what's happening over there. After he released his statement, or standing on the tarmac saying everybody should get out, and then reiterating that on social media, this is what happened. These are folks, some of it before, but some of it after. Let's show the people who are leaving, who have been leaving Tehran, I believe, on the orders or the warning of the president of the United States. Look at those cars there. Look at what's happening. These are folks who are just trying to get out. And, I think the only thing that we can relate this to is when someone says there's a hurricane or some sort of storm coming, people trying to leave the South or leave Florida. And so this is what is happening. This is the world that folks are living in the Middle East. There they go. This is after the president's warning of people trying to leave. And then bombs, of course, dropping everywhere. Donald Trump is also now in a conflict with Tucker Carlson. They're taking swipes at each other. Tucker Carlson, let's put up what he's tweeting. Tucker Carlson says the real divide isn't between people who support Israel and people who support Iran or the Palestinians. The real divide is between those who casually encourage violence and those who seek to prevent it. Between warmongers and peacemakers, who are the warmongers? Who are the warmongers, he's saying? I don't know. Who are the warmongers? They would include anyone who's calling Donald Trump today to demand airstrikes and other direct U.S. military involvement in a war with Iran. On that list, and he names names, Sean Hannity, Mark Levine, Rupert Murdoch, Ike Perlmutter, and Miriam Adelson. At some point, they will all have to answer for this, but you should know their names now. It's interesting because, Tucker Carlson worked for Rupert Murdoch for quite some time. Now he is calling him out in this post. And then Donald Trump is responding, and he is saying, of course, in a lot of caps, somebody please explain to kooky Tucker Carlson that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Well, again, according to his own head of national intelligence, Iran is not anywhere near. Again, this is according to Tulsi Gabbard. Iran is not anywhere near obtaining a nuclear weapon. But Donald Trump, it seems, does not matter. And he said he doesn't care, and he doesn't believe that Iran is not near. He said Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Now, you've been watching all of this unfold, and we've been telling you all about these things. But I want you to see what people are dealing with. And we've just been playing the video, but I really want you to see what people are dealing with over in that region. Some of the bombs that are falling and some of the fright that people are facing. Here it is. Is there any sound to that, Andy? Yeah. That's just the music, yeah.
The attacks, which were said to be the fourth wave in recent days, reportedly caused severe damage in major Israeli cities including Tel Aviv and Haifa.
Look at those cars. Can you imagine living like this?
Air raid sirens blared incessantly. In both cities, loud explosions rocked buildings followed by flames and thick smoke that blanketed the sky.
آنچه که ملاحظه کردید، صدایی که شنیدید، فضای غبارآلود استادیوم
Unbelievable. And that is every single moment. No one knows what is going to happen. And look, this is in the middle of the night. Look, you see that some of the missiles and bombs there, and then just falling like shooting stars across the sky, but falling. Also, Iran has claimed that they have managed to somehow deceive the Iron Dome protection over Israel, and they have been touting that, and Israel is denying that, but they are saying there's some of the interception of some of those missiles, but they are saying that they have managed to hit strategic targets. At least Tehran is saying, or Iran is saying, they've managed to hit strategic targets.
Guard Corps,
inside of Israel. So unbelievable. This is a collection of reports that's happening there. Can you imagine living under these particular conditions in that area? Look at that. Unbelievable. What do you think? And then, as Nicholas Kristof just said, they're still dealing with the situation in Gaza. And in some ways, this is the Iron Dome misfires there. Iranian tactic disorients Israeli systems. So that's what they're saying, that they're disorienting these Israeli systems. But in some ways, this is a distraction to what is happening in Gaza, because folks there are still suffering as well. And the folks in Gaza so doubly hit there as well, and having to deal with the situation on top of what happened on October 7th to Israel, same thing. And then, of course, Benjamin Netanyahu still there in the region, saying, hey, he's got to do what he's got to do. He doesn't believe that Iran, it doesn't want Iran to have access at least to a nuclear weapon. And he believes that they are close, even though the head of national intelligence, director of national intelligence in the United States, saying that is not happen. Does this seem the same that Trump took office, that war has gotten worse? Well, Donald Trump, someone says, does this seem the same that Trump has gotten in office and that war is somehow worse? Well, Donald Trump came into office saying that he wanted to stop all the unnecessary wars, all of these long wars happening across the world. And that appears not to be happening. It appears that we are escalating towards more of major conflicts happening overseas. You have what's happening in Russia and Ukraine. You got what's happening in Israel and Iran. And then you also have what's happening with Israel and Gaza. And not to mention, there are conflicts still happening, of course, that we don't pay that much attention to. That's still happening in Congo and in Africa. That we just, for somehow, the media and the world just somehow chooses to ignore and focus on what's happening in the Middle East, even though people are dying in Africa and Sudan still. So it's an interesting place to be in right now in the United States with all of this volatility, in foreign policy and in conflicts overseas. We still have issues that are happening right here in the United States, especially with our economy and what's happening with the Department of Veterans Affairs, which we'll talk about in just a bit. And we're also talking about Donald Trump and these tariffs. And now he is backtracking on tariffs now because they're hurting a segment of the population of the folks who voted for him. And now all of a sudden he is concerned because he's worried about the support from people or lack of support from the people who voted for him. So let's get into all of that in just a moment. But first, let me just give you one more word from our sponsor here. And support for the Don Lemon Show today comes from BetterHelp. In these trying times, you guys know that we could all use some help with mental health. That's 100% for sure. You guys know I like to take the stigma off of mental health. And because folks should be talking to someone, you should be getting your mental health checkup always. And just like if you go to the doctor for any ailment that you have, you should go to a professional to help you with any mental health issue that you might have. And let me just tell you, men who are suffering right now, it just so happens to be that June is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. Men today face immense pressure to perform, to provide, and keep it all together. So it is no wonder that 6 million men in the U.S. suffer from depression every single year, and it is often undiagnosed. It is okay to struggle. We all do. It's okay to go through things. We all go through things. Real strength comes from opening up about what you're carrying and doing something about it. And that means getting some help, either talking to your religious or spiritual leader or talking to a friend. But I think more importantly, speaking to a mental health professional. And that's where BetterHelp comes in. It is the world's largest online therapy provider. BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Talk it out with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off of their first month at betterhelp.com/DonLemon. That's betterhelp.com/DonLemon. 35,000 licensed professionals, 10 years of experience matching people with the right therapist from their diverse network of more than 35,000 licensed therapists. Plus, you can switch therapists at any point. It is affordable. It is accessible. BetterHelp.com/DonLemon. BetterHelp.com/DonLemon. Okay, so thank you very much to all of our sponsors. Now let's get into Donald Trump backtracking on his own immigration policy because the economy is bleeding. That's what he says, bleeding out. Our farmers are being hurt badly. They have worked for them. They've worked for them 20 years. We can't take farmers and take all the people and send them back. Now, I thought he wanted to send everybody back as much as possible. But now he's saying you can't send them all back. You don't want to help farmers. Didn't people tell him that before these tariffs, that the tariffs were a tax on consumers and also a tax on business owners and farmers, and he wasn't listening? This is the president talking about that.
Not sure I have that one.
Okay, it's a video from Fox News that's in there of him doing the press conference. We'll get it. But anyway, Trump officials reverse guidance exempting farms, hotels from immigration raids. ICE agents have been told to continue conducting enforcement operations at agricultural businesses despite concerns about negative effects on the food industry. Again, so this is seen as a taco. And as soon as you have him talking about it, I'd like to hear it. But he's discussing it about the panic attack. Let's be clear. He's not having a change of heart. He's having a panic attack is what they're saying in the social media post. But he has been asked about it in briefings. And he says, our farmers are being hurt badly. We can't take farmers and take all their people and then send them back. Donald Trump, which is ironic and odd because that is what he's been doing. And not only why does it matter for the farmers more than it matters for anybody else who wants due process? You can send folks back, because they don't work in the farming industry without due process, but the people who work in the farming industry, you somehow want them to have due process. Perhaps if he had due process for everyone, instead of just doing a blanket deportation for people who he judged or deemed to be criminals and lawless folks, without ever finding out if that is necessary or true, perhaps he wouldn't be in the situation where he's having to retreat again and then screwing up the folks in the stock market who are concerned about losing everything that, well, a lot of what they own, because Donald Trump can't get it together. Here he is.
Peter?
Thank you, President Trump. I have two. First, on immigration. What made you change your mind about targeting in California farmers and people in the hotel and leisure business?
Well, we're not targeting. In fact, if you look today, I put out a statement today about farmers. Our farmers are being hurt badly by, they have very good workers. They've worked for them for 20 years. They're not citizens, but they've turned out to be, great. And we're going to have to do something about that. We can't take farmers and take all their people and send them back because they don't have maybe what they're supposed to have, maybe not. And you know what's going to happen and what is happening? They get rid of some of the people because, you go into a farm and you look and people they've been there for 20, 25 years and they've worked great and the owner of the farm loves them and everything else. And then you're supposed to throw them out. And you know what happens? They end up hiring the people, the criminals that have come in, the murderers from prisons and everything else. So we're going to have an order on that pretty soon, I think. We can't do that to our farmers. And leisure, too, hotels. We're going to have to use a lot of common sense on that.
And my other question about
Oh, you're muted, Don.
Thank you very much, Andy. Perhaps if he had thought about that before he enacted these tariffs, we would not be in this place. And that's why people are so concerned about Donald Trump being in charge in this particular moment, considering what's happening overseas and what's happening here. He does not have a plan. You heard that from the Congress last week when Pete Hegseth answered questions in front of Congress. She said, "Where's the plan? We don't know where you're going." There is no plan. There's no plan for our domestic policy. There's no plan for our foreign policy. And so he just is going wherever the wind blows. That shows you that he doesn't know how to govern and he doesn't actually know what he's doing. Just as he sporadically planned that parade on Saturday that turned out to be a flop, his domestic policy is turning out to be a flop, and his foreign policy is turning out to be a flop. But for some reason, his supporters, they don't care. And they don't somehow seem to see this. They think that it is owning or hurting the libs, when it is owning and hurting the very people who voted for him and the people who support him. Though I do believe that support will waver. I do believe that those people now will start to realize, once it starts to hit home, that they made a major blunder here. Perhaps they would like a Republican to have been elected as president of the United States, but this particular Republican, this MAGA person, is not doing the business of the country. So as Dana Hickman says, so he's admitting that he and MAGA are wrong. All of us in the streets saying to get him out is scaring him. Didn't Dems tell him everything that he's now saying? Did he just say that to use common sense? Look, folks have been saying that, and you're right. And all the people who are out in the streets. On the right, though, the media and their folks are saying, well, what happened? The marches and the No King marches, that was so stupid that it didn't accomplish anything. I don't believe that. I think when you look at 5 million people across this nation as compared to the hundreds of people who attended his birthday military parade in Washington, when you compare those two, there's really no comparison. There's really no comparison. The 5 million people who showed up in droves. The people who showed up to support Donald Trump and what he's doing now did not show up in droves. And I think that hit him hard. I know that it did. All you have to do is look at his face and look how he is just careening out of control right now. How he is showing, his ego is showing. His concern is showing. The spiraling is showing. Leaving the G7 early. He didn't have to make such a big commotion about leaving the G7 early. That was to draw attention back to him. To draw attention to him and to make it seem as if he were in control and he had something major to do with what is happening in the Middle East. What's happening in the Middle East is Bibi Netanyahu defying Donald Trump and testing the boundaries of Donald Trump's power. Saying, hey, look, I'm going to do what I want. And you can say no all you want, but I'm going to keep going. And so in that, Donald Trump, because he has to show support for Israel, they are a major ally. He's facing lots of pressure to do that. So now he has to pretend that he is somehow leading this as the shadow leader of this effort, of these actions that are going on in Israel and Iran. And he doesn't. This is Bibi Netanyahu with a vacuum of leadership from the United States and from Donald Trump. That's what's happening here. Do not be fooled. Do not think for one moment that Donald Trump is in control of this. Now, his lack of leadership and knowledge, not having a compass for foreign policy, can put us in a precarious position. It can put us in a terrible position where the United States is drawn into this. And sadly, if we are, there is the possibility of losing lives, American lives, in this particular situation, all because Donald Trump doesn't know what he is doing. And the people around him don't know what they're doing. The person who should be on top of this, who is head of the Defense Department, Pete Hegseth, has no experience, doesn't know, is a DEI hire in their definition. Someone who was hired for the position because he is a white man, and Donald Trump prefers to have white men and a few white women in his cabinet under his leadership. That's what's happening here in the United States. So before we get out of here, Andy, can you grab we have some new stuff that came up in our merch store today. Just want to tell you about that. All right. This is a new sweatshirt. So we had a members only collection that dropped yesterday, and it should open up to you guys today. But anyway, these are mine. Let me show these real quick, Andy. These are mine. This came in yesterday. I was going to wear it today, but we're talking about very serious stuff. So that's a sweatshirt. It's really awesome. And this, I love the sort of tone on tone thing, right? So you guys asked for merch, I'm going to show it off. And this is a short sleeve one. And maybe I'll wear it this evening if we are not at war, World War III. Are we? Who knows? But anyway, let's put it up. So here is, this is what we have up. This is a new stuff that's up on the website. And I love this. You guys know what I say. So this is a sticker that I always say, turn the TV off. And then below it, it has the Don Lemon Show. And then this is a sweatshirt, same thing, that has turn the TV off. Click on that one on the sweatshirt. I just want to see it up close and personal. And so the sweatshirt, turn the TV off. And yeah, I like this guy's style who's wearing it right here. And so you too can be a Don Lemon Show sweatshirt model if you go in there and grab it. So anyway, that is our new sweatshirt. Turn the TV off and the Don Lemon Show. I like that. Someone said the young people are not going to even know what that is. They're going to go, what is that thing? Young people, that is a television. Okay. So Davida Macklin, you too can have it. So go over to our show page over on the YouTube. I love the turn the TV off merch. Yes. And then we also have the t-shirt. If you back up a little bit, the t-shirt, and this should drop soon. I think it's unlocked. I think it stays open to our members, our members. I think it's the Lemon Heads and the Lemon Legends. I think it stays open to them for about 24 hours. So this should open up for you guys. So turn the TV off t-shirt. The color is fire, right? I know, I love it. And so there you go. All right. So guys, look, today was not quite as the same type of show that we normally do, but we do have to inform you, and I do have to tell you about things that are important to the world. And what's happening overseas in the Middle East is really important to the world and the United States, and we all can be drawn into this. And there are implications for our economy. There are implications for our men and women in uniform who are overseas in that region, whether they become targets or not. And so we'll keep an eye on all of it for you. Okay. So I hope you appreciate this sort of traditional newscast type of show, informative, that you have with Nicholas Kristof, one of the best journalists, I believe, in the world. Okay. So we're going to see you back here live at 5 p.m. Eastern time.
Oh, you froze on my end, Don.
Yeah, he's frozen for me too. Well, I think we were all going to say it. So, Lemon community, turn the TV off.
Thanks everyone for watching. Your support means the world to us. So make sure you hit the like button and you subscribe to our channel to make sure that you never ever miss a video. We're live every day, 10 a.m. Eastern time. We drop even more content at 2 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Eastern. And if you want more Don Lemon Show content, we'd love for you to become a member of the Lemon community, where you will receive access to special community posts. You'll get exclusive content and members-only live shows. So head over to our channel page or click the join button on this video. Again, thank you for watching. We appreciate your love and your support, and we will see you next time.